Welcome to Global Tax Talk. I'm Will Morris, and we're filming here at PWC's Africa Tax Policy and Business Symposium in Mombasa, Kenya, where I'm delighted to be joined by ABEKU Gyan-Quansah, who's the West Africa Indirect Tax Leader, and PWC's Ghana Tax Policy Leader. ABEKU, welcome.
Thank you very much, Will.
Good. So let's start with your home country, with Ghana. And so what significant tax policy trends have we been seeing in Ghana over the past year, and how have companies been impacted by that?
All right, so thank you very much, Will. In Ghana, we have been doing a number of things. And for the sake of our audience, it's important to note that we had a new government in place from January this year. And that new government came at the back of promising to take out what we describe in Ghana as nuisance taxes. And for the purpose of our audience, this is essentially a tax where you spend too much effort but generate very little returns from that. So this new government, upon taking power, repealed a number of taxes. So one, the previous government had an intention to support the environment by introducing an emissions levy. That emissions levy, even though passed into law, never saw the light of day. So this new government has repealed it. Another thing that happened in Ghana as a result of the new government was that we introduced what is called tax on financial services, which in Ghana we called the electronic transactions levy. Now, the challenge there was that the previous government promised that they were going to raise a number of taxes because of how informal our economy is. So although persons may not use the typical banks in transacting, government said these people may not pay taxes, but they will do mobile money transactions. So on every transaction of mobile money beyond a certain threshold, a 1% tax applied on the transferor. What you found is that this new government decided to also repeal that. And lastly, one of the major things that we've seen, probably I'll add one more, Will, so that our audience can get a lot more perspective, is that this new government also promised to reform Ghana's VAT law. If you've ever visited Ghana, Will, I know you visited Ghana last year. If you look at a typical invoice for VAT, you find 3 additional levies. The first levy was for health. The second levy was for education. And the last levy that came up, interestingly, was for COVID. So COVID came, the fiscals of government were affected, and to recover, government introduced the COVID-19 recovery levy. This new government has promised to reform the entire VAT system of Ghana. We are expecting that in 2026, we're going to have a new VAT law. So it's very important for businesses to pay attention to these changes because they may affect certain VAT bases. Certain things that may have been exempt may now become taxable, and vice versa. And then the last thing I would like to say, that looking at all the world's conversation around the global minimum tax, Ghana is not a member of the inclusive framework. However, we have our own version of a minimum income tax. So paying attention to what has happened in so many African countries, there is what we call an alternative minimum tax. Ghana's version is actually a minimum chargeable income. Which means that the minimum tax is determined first by establishing a minimum taxable income or a minimum chargeable income. And then the rate of tax that applies to your industry is what actually applies to you. So in broad terms, what the government of Ghana is basically looking at is to do away with taxes that are nuisance, meaning too much effort, little yield. Reform the taxes on transactions, principally VAT, with the introduction of a new VAT law, and then not to hamper transactions through the repeal of the electronic transmission levy.
Good. That's really interesting and quite a lot to take in. So obviously a lot for people to think about. I want to come back to VAT, as obviously you are the markets leader on that as well. One of the things we've heard at the symposium over the past couple of days is a lot of talking about e-invoicing, the digitalization of various tax authorities across the whole of Africa. So could you talk to us a little about that?
All right. So, Will, Ghana and a number of African countries are also looking at digitalizing the issues around VAT. And just to take you back and using Ghana as an example, in 2018, we found a need to introduce what is called a fiscal electronic device. That was to address the challenge whereby government felt that people were either not raising the VAT invoice as they should,
Yep.
or
Yep.
people misstate the volume of transactions upon which VAT is ultimately assessed.
Right.
So what the government decided to do in Ghana was to introduce the fiscal electronic device. Unfortunately, that could not see the day of light. So in 2022, government then decided to adopt what various African countries and even in some countries in Europe are adopting through what is called the electronic invoicing.
Yep.
The technical name for that in Ghana is a certified invoicing system.
Okay.
And how that essentially works is that using an API, you can actually integrate your system to that of the Ghana Revenue Authority.
You may have to explain API to people.
All right. So basically, it's an interface that connects your accounting system to that of the revenue.
Okay.
So as soon as you raise invoices with your accounting system, straight
real-time reporting.
Real-time reporting. Worst case, by the end of the day, the revenue has an idea of how much sales have been made in the day.
Yep.
Actually, taxpayers have an obligation that if the system is not working, you need to report yourself to the Revenue Authority.
Okay.
So as to avoid situations whereby you are trading, but you are not reporting on volumes of trade to the tax authority.
Right.
So various African countries are actually adopting an e-invoicing. And probably to add also, one of the trends that we have seen is that because of how informal our economies are, governments have concentrated its tax collection initiative to few industries or to few taxpayers through the introduction of what we call the withholding VAT concept. So basically, what we knew existed traditionally in various African countries was that whenever you make payments, you need to withhold tax on that particular payment. Now, what the government has further introduced is that if VAT was charged, then you also need to also withhold a portion of that VAT and also remit it to government. So these are a few of the VAT trends I would like to share for the sake of our audience to repeat the issues around the electronic invoicing, which even in the case of Ghana, there is another version we're trying to introduce, which is the fiscal electronic device, and also the issue around withholding VAT. And well, I don't think this commentary will be complete without talking about VAT on electronic commerce. So we all know about the challenges that comes with the digitalization of our economies. The rules that were developed about 100 years ago to allocate tax rights may not be fully suited for our current economies. So various governments across Africa are trying to introduce some form of VAT on electronic services. And how this essentially works is that the responsibility to register and to comply with VAT rules in Ghana and a number of African countries are also placed at the doorfoot of a non-resident entity. So that as you trade with Ghanaian persons that pay you with Ghanaian issued cards, for instance, you need to take the VAT and also remit that to the government. So e-invoicing, VAT on electronic services, and in some instances, withholding VAT are some of the trends that you tend to see across Africa.
Okay, so one very quick question at the end. What would be the one piece of advice that you would give businesses with all of these tax changes going on?
So with all these changes that are going on, especially in the case of Ghana, my piece of advice to businesses is that participate in this conversation. Government's primary responsibility is to govern. Businesses' primary responsibility is to do business and do it well. Each party may be an expert in their field, but they need to collaborate. So if you are a business in Ghana, you are a business in Africa, and you tend to see a lot of these changes coming up, engage governments a little bit early, put across your recommendations, don't wait for them to become law, have assessments raised on you, and now you need to go through a painful process of trying to resolve those disputes. Those are not helpful. So another related opinion is please get close to your consultants. Obviously, I will recommend a PWC consultant and have these conversations to ensure that you can do very profitable business in Ghana and in Africa.
Great. Well, Abeku, thank you very much for joining me. It's been great to have you here.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. And come back next time so that you stay global tax ready.